Hi everyone, I wanted to make a quick video today, which is the end of the year book tag. Now I've done this tag before because I find it really useful towards the end of the year trying to figure out what I want to read next, what I still have to read, rather than just looking up at my bookshelves sort of in a panic of what do I still have to read. So I'm going to go through the questions. I'll put them all in the description below if you want to answer them yourself in the comments or do this tag yourself. So the first question is, are there any books you started this year that you need to finish? And yeah, I have a number of them. So the first is The Eighth Life, and this is a big, thick Georgian novel, family saga, that I started way back in August for Women in Translation month and week, and it's finally being published next week, and I still haven't finished it. I mean, it's one of those big books that, with this issue with big books, that it's so easy to start them, and I was really enjoying it, and I've read, I think, like 250 or so pages of it, which sounds quite a lot, but it's almost, how long is it? It's like 925 pages, so I still have quite a long way to go, and it's being published this coming week, and I still haven't finished it, and I just sort of got distracted from reading it with other books, and but I still want to go back to it and finish reading it because it's really good, really absorbing family epic story going through generations of different wars and skirmishes within the family itself, and really absorbing and good. So yes, I want to finish this. Also, I started reading The Private Joys of Nnenna Maloney, and haven't finished it yet because I got a bit distracted from it. I mean, there's nothing wrong or bad with the story or characters. They're sort of interesting, but I feel like the way the author is writing about them, it's that sort of thing that authors do sometimes, where I think they know the characters so well, and so they make sort of assumptions that the readers know them too. So I find that the story is sort of jumping ahead of itself before really explaining who these characters are and what their situation is. But I would like to go back and finish it because it is a really interesting novel. Then I still haven't finished On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. This beautiful novel that a lot of people have talked about, and one of my most anticipated books of the year. And so I started it one day just thinking like, oh, I'm finally going to read this, and I started getting into it. But then I just got distracted reading other things, so I haven't finished it yet. And I think partly I got distracted because there's a sort of shift in the narrative at one point where it goes back to the mother's story and the mother's home country, and is talking about that sort of wartime experience rather than the author's own experience. And I found that like a little bit jarring, and it just but it's still like really beautiful, really interesting writing. It just meant I got a bit distracted from it. So I want to go back and finish this. And I started reading this novel, The Cave, by Saramago, when I went to Portugal at the beginning of the summer, and I haven't finished reading this because I've been reading it aloud to my partner, and we just haven't had the time to finish it, even though it's not. I mean, it's a few hundred pages long, but the text is very, very dense. You can see it just like these big blocks of text in it, and it's really funny and good, even though there's barely any plot. There's not. It's about a potter and his daughter and his son-in-law, and how basically he makes pottery for this city, and to be sent to the city, and they've decided they don't want it or need it anymore. He's a bit redundant now, and so it's like, what is he gonna do now? And we're I think almost halfway through with it, and reading it aloud, it's very funny. I think a lot of it's very like dry humor, but the humor of it comes out much more reading it aloud, and but it's also like very philosophical and thoughtful, but does so in sort of a playful way, which isn't too pretentious. And so I love Jose Saramago's writing. I think he's really interesting, and and I hadn't heard of this novel before, and so I've continued to read aloud to him from it, but it's just hard to find much time to actually do that. And this isn't really, book I want to finish because I read the first book in this series called the Copenhagen Trilogy by Tove Ditlevsen, and I read the first book called Childhood, and then it follows her into her youth and then into her teenage years and sort of as in her early 20s becoming a budding writer. And so I want to finish these two because I loved that first book so much, and I've heard that the third book is sort of the best one, so I sort of want to build up to that one. So yeah, this is a newly published translation of an autobiographical trilogy, which was first published, I think, back in the 60s or 70s. So it's quite old, but is just been newly translated and is really interesting. So the second question is, do you have an autumnal book to transition into the end of the year? And it's not really an autumnal book, I don't think per se, but the cover of it sort of looks autumnal. I mean, I guess it might be more spring, but yeah, this is this book of essays by Mary Oliver called Upstream, which Anna James recommended to me when we got together and made a video making book recommendations to each other. And I just think the subject matter and the style will really suit me towards the end of the year. So it's nonfiction, but it's also talking a lot about nature, I think. And I've just had this draw this year to read more books about nature. So I think this will be a good one to get to. And so the next question is there a new release you're still waiting for? There's a new book by Mina Kandasamy, a short novella that is, or maybe it's only just been published, or I'm really eager to read that because I loved her first book called When I Hit You. I think that's what it was called. Such a powerful, really beautiful novel. Really, really emotional. Really, really difficult to read in some ways, but really, she's such an interesting writer. So I'm looking forward to that and getting a copy of that and reading that at some point soon. Then there are, what are 3 books you want to read before the end of the year? And so first off, there's this novel called Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl by Andrea Lawler. And I've heard such great things about this novel, which is about a young man who is sort of amorphous in his gender and his sexuality, that he sleeps around with a lot of people, but also I think his body actually transitions back and forth between different sexes, or maybe, I'm not sure how it works totally, but I just think it sounds like such an interesting subject matter, and just heard such good things about it. I'm really drawn to it, and very pretty cover. So then also there's Ali Smith's new novel Spring, which I still haven't read. I mean, maybe I should wait now till it's actually spring again and read this again. But summer is coming next year, so I don't know. I was thinking maybe I should go back and read all 3 books in this quadrilogy before summer comes along. But I've still not read Spring, which is awful. Like I've even though she made for me, she drew for me in the cover of this armadillo, and which is very sweet. And and obviously she's one of my favorite authors. I've been wanting to read it. I don't know why I haven't got around to reading it. Sometimes we just have books like that which we get and then they just sit on our shelves for ages and ages, and even though they're one of our most anticipated books, and so I don't know why that happens really, but so still want to read that. Then there is this novel called Vivian by Christina Hesselholt, which is about the life of the photographer Vivian Maier, or inspired by her life. And we don't know a lot about her life, so it's sort of interesting. Wonder how much sort of like fictional liberties she'll take in creating her story. But I'm also sort of interested to read this because I've been watching the new series of RuPaul's Drag Race set in the UK, the very first one set in the UK. And one of the main contenders for that contest is a drag queen called The Vivian. And so that just sort of reminded me that I still want to read this novel, which is a very silly reason to because this novel has nothing to do with that. But it just sort of reminded me of it. And and I just, I love that photographer's work, and I'm just so interested in the subject matter and how she chooses to explore that. So very eager to read those 3 books still. So the next question is there a book you think could still shock you and become your favorite book of the year? And I'm not really sure. I'm sure there are some which will surprise me. And but there's this one nonfiction book called The Living Mountain by Nan Shepherd, which is another nonfiction book, sort of about nature. And as I talked about, I yeah, just drawn to reading more nonfiction books, and I've just heard such good things about this. This new edition has an introduction by Robert McFarlane and a afterword by Jeanette Winterson, and I'm really drawn to reading that as well. And has such a beautiful cover. I mean, it sort of gleams a bit and is just it's so beautiful. So I think this could surprise me and become one of my new favorite writers, because I've sort of been surprised this year in books I've read of authors from the 1900s whose books have been newly republished, and find that they're some of my favorite new books. And so it's exciting to find these old authors that have sort of been out of print for a while. So the final question is, have you already started making reading plans for 2020? And I mean, I have a bit. I mean, just the other day, I bumped into Anna James because it was funny. The Women's Prize tweeted out their new judges for next year's prize, which is the 25th anniversary of their prize. And so I tweeted about that, and Anna responded to that, and we were sort of jokingly saying like, oh, we're gonna get ready to start making more videos again. It's like almost the season, which feels like that's way in advance. And it just happened that evening, after we tweeted at each other like that, we bumped into each other at a publisher's showcase, and I didn't know that she was going to be there, and she doesn't come to many events like that anymore, so it was a really nice surprise. But then we were talking about next year's prize and authors that might be listed for next year's prize, and so there's quite a few that look really good. There's this novel called How Much of These Hills is Gold by C. Pam Jain, which I've heard such great praise for. It's and these are all books that aren't being published until early next year. But I've got advanced reading copies of them, and with some blurbs by really interesting authors, and just the way that they're described makes them sound really good. So this is one of them. There's also this novel called The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abe Dare, and I heard her read from this at an event, and it sounds very good. And so have good feelings about this and eager to read this for next year. Also this novel called My Dark Vanessa, which a number of people have been talking about, and I also heard the author read from it recently, and the author's also from the state of Maine, like me, and so I always feel like natural affinity for anybody who's from the state of Maine. This is, I think it's quite difficult subject matter. It has to do with a young adolescent woman and her affair with a much older man, and sort of is exploring that whole difficult Lolita type subject matter. Then there's this novel called The Mercies by Kieran Millwood Hargrave, who I saw read the other evening at this event I was at with Anna, and just sounds really good. It's sort of historical novel about this series of witch trials that took place many hundreds of years ago. And this author, she's a young adult novelist and children's book author, but this is her first novel for adults, and a very good friend of mine has also read it recently and said it's great, and so I'm very eager to read that. And then also Emily St. John Mandel's novel. I just got an advance copy of her new novel, The Glass Hotel, being published next year, and so excited for this because like a lot of people, I loved her previous novel, Station 11. Is it 11 or 7? No, it's 11, isn't it? Yeah, Station 11. My good friend Christy read this recently, an advance copy, and said it's great. So very eager to read that as well. So I'm making plans for next year already, and already anticipating the Women's Prize for next year. So so those are all the questions. And I just enjoyed this tag because it sort of helps me organize thinking about what I want to read before the end of the year and what I want to read next. So it's good. So let me know if you want to answer the questions in the comments below, or if you've read any of these books, if there's any of them that you would suggest I start with, let me know that. And hope you're doing well and reading good things. I'll speak to you again soon. Bye, everyone.